This presentation is going to have two parts. In the first part, we're going to discuss some key things to keep in mind as you're planning your adventure to keep you safe, as well as key things to think through when something goes wrong. And then the second part is going to be a virtual Jeopardy game for everyone to play. We're going to have prizes, the top 5 contestants, and just to let you know, the answers should all be found in the first part of the presentation. So we're going to give you the answers, and then you just have to remember them. Before we start, I also want to give a quick shout out to the Facebook group Cincinnati Hikes and their 5,700 members. The administrators of that started a mentorship program that led to Mary and I meeting in the first place. So I've been planning and leading hikes and backpacking trips for a long time. And I was very happy to volunteer as a mentor. Mary was a relatively new backpacker, just looking for someone to bounce ideas off and to gain some confidence investing in gear and planning her own trip. So with that as background, I'm turning things over to Mary to talk about that trip.
Okay, so as Nancy mentioned, she kindly agreed to take me under her wing and show me the ropes in the backpacking world. So our trip to Carter Caves was in October last year. The scenery was beautiful, as you can see from these pictures. And overall, the trip was very helpful. I learned a lot from Nancy, which I knew I would. However, there was an unexpected turn that led to some safety lessons we didn't expect to have to cover on this trip. So we want to share what we learned with all of you, and these are our lessons learned on the trail. Our plan was to do a quick introductory trip since I had only been on one backpacking trip before this, and I had borrowed someone else's gear then. So I had a great time, and I knew that I wanted to continue backpacking, and that's what led me to reach out to Nancy through the mentorship program that she just talked about. So she suggested that I go to Road, Rivers, and Trails to get help picking out my gear since I was still new to all of this and I had no clue what I was doing. They were awesome. They helped me find everything that I needed, and then I wanted to try out all of my new stuff. So that's when Nancy and I started planning our trip to Carter Caves. We decided to just do one night, 8 miles of total hiking on the 4 Seas Trail. We thought this should be fairly easy. What could go wrong? Now we want to take a minute here to do a quick poll, just out of curiosity to see how many of you have been there before. So how many of you have been to Carter Caves State Park and maybe have hiked the 4 Seas Trail, just to see who knows what we're talking about? If you'll take a minute to chime in.
Looks like 83% have cast their vote, and more than half of them are saying the 4 what?
Okay, so you probably won't know the area that we're talking about, but that's okay. And if you get a chance to go there, you should check it out. It's really beautiful. It's about 3 hours from Cincinnati. It'd be a great trip. So moving on. On the first day of our trip, we met at the park, we got our permits, we drove to the trailhead and ate lunch just as planned. So everything was going smoothly. We started hiking around noon. It was raining, but we weren't soaked. We were enjoying hiking and talking. We went about 3 miles until we got to a place called Shangri-La Arch. We decided to take the stairs down to explore under the arch, which we did carefully because the stairs were old and steep and slick from the rain. And then we weren't sure where the trail went at this point. So Nancy went back up the stairs to see if she could see signs of the trail, and I stayed below to look on the far side. And then after a couple minutes, I heard a loud thud. And I immediately thought the worst, that she might have fallen, but I didn't know. So I'm trying to scramble up over these rocks that I had climbed down so I could head towards the noise. And I'm calling out to Nancy. So I called her a few times, but she didn't answer. And I didn't know if she just wasn't nearby and the noise was something else, or if she was hurt and couldn't respond. So when I made my way back to where the stairs were, I saw her on the ground there at the bottom. She was conscious, thankfully, and she told me that she had fallen down like 5 or so of the last steps and landed on her hip on the rocks. And that's despite having both hands on the railings and moving carefully on the steps. So this goes to show that you can be doing everything right, but something can still go wrong. So there's a few pictures on this slide. That top picture is Nancy's phone after the fall. It was in her pants pocket, and it might be hard to tell from the picture, but it's completely curved. It just got crushed between the rock and her hip when she fell. And the middle picture is a picture of the bruise that she had after she got home. So obviously very painful. And the bottom picture is Nancy with her daughter years earlier at that same spot, Shangri-La Arch. Their camera is on the steps where she slipped. So as you can see, the ground beneath there is all rock. And she was higher up than the camera is here. So that gives you an idea of how far she fell onto the boulder there. So after this unexpected fall, we needed to find out how badly she was hurt and to decide what to do from here. So we had to come up with a new plan. I knew Nancy was in a lot of pain. Initially, she wasn't sure if she could walk or even stand up. After a few minutes, she was able to get up and move under the arch where it was dry. So we just stayed there for a while so she could rest and we could decide what to do. The questions we needed to answer were, is she able to walk? And if so, how far? Would she be able to finish the hike we planned, or did we need to head back to the cars? Did I need to leave her here and go get help by myself? If I did that, it would be dark before we got back to her. Would she be okay here by herself for hours? Would I be able to find my way back to the trailhead? So that's what was running through our minds. And now we're going to give you some safety procedures to consider as we walk through our experience. And by the way, if you have that lessons learned handout in front of you, this would be a good place to take notes, and it could improve your chances of winning the Jeopardy game later. So first, some things to know before you head out on a hike. Keep in mind that the rescuer is the most important person in the event of an emergency. You can't help if you also become hurt. After I heard the crash at the arch, I wanted to make my way to that sound as quickly as possible to find out what happened. But I knew it was slick from the rain where I was, so I needed to move slowly so as not to fall. If I had fallen because I was rushing, we could both have been in the same position, and then I wouldn't have been able to help Nancy if I needed to, or to go get help if that was needed.
So this is Nancy again. So while I was lying there on the wet rocks in the rain, wondering if my hip was broken and wondering how we would get help if I couldn't walk, I was vividly remembering the moment at home when I decided I didn't need to bring my Garmin with me on this trip. It was a short trip on a highly traveled, moderate trail, lots of people there hike it all the time, little chance of getting lost or having any serious mishap. So that was a mistake. And I just want to make the point here that even in well-known, well-traveled places, when you're in the backcountry, anything can happen. So the length of your hike has nothing to do with the likelihood of having an emergency. That's exactly what happened here. Things just went sideways on us.
Another thing to keep in mind before you start out on the trail is the importance of staying found. I realized on this trip that I don't pay enough attention to trail signs when I'm following someone else. So it's so easy for me to just follow that backpack in front of me without looking for blazes and signs along the way. But I realized that if Nancy wasn't able to finish the hike and I needed to hike back myself, it would have been important for me to know my way back and to be able to tell a rescue team where I had left her if I needed to.
So this is another area where, because my past experience with this trail was so unproblematic, I was a little too casual about the pre-trip safety stuff. And my safety briefing with Mary, which we did have one, I made sure we both knew where the other's emergency contact and health information was located. That's the form that you see on your screen. And also where the first aid kit was stored in my pack. But there were other things that I should have done and covered with her, even though this was supposed to be just a simple, easy hike. One of them was to discuss where's the closest place to access help if you get into trouble on the trail. A second thing would be, where would we have access to cell phone service? Is there going to be signal on the trail or not? And if not, where can we find it? And the third would be, what number to call for help? 911 is virtually always an option, but there are some places where there are more direct numbers to call for search and rescue. So again, as I was lying there in the rain at the bottom of the steps, remembering that I didn't have my Garmin, I started to think about how important that cell phone service question could end up being. We had already discovered that there wasn't any service on the trail, but I hadn't checked at the trailhead where the cars were to see if there was service there. If Mary ended up having to go back to the trailhead to call for help and found out that there wasn't a service at the trailhead, she wouldn't have known the closest place to go where she could call.
So if there is an emergency, the first two things you need to do are to survey the scene and survey the injured person. To survey the scene, ask yourself if it's safe for you to approach and if it's safe for the injured person where they are. At Shangri-La Arch, I knew the rocks were slick, so I needed to move cautiously. And since it was raining and wet where Nancy fell, the quicker she could get safely under the arch and out of the rain, the better. To survey the injured person, you're trying to assess the initial state they are in and what help they might need immediately. So I suspected that Nancy had fallen, but I didn't see it happen. Although I wasn't sure if she was conscious when I was calling to her and she wasn't responding, I later realized she just couldn't hear me. When I got to her, she was still on the ground, but she was able to tell me about the fall. So I was able to find out pretty quickly what happened. I knew she was talking, so she was breathing, she was conscious, she was not bleeding, but could she move? And while we waited there to see how she felt, I wasn't sure what would be needed of me. Did she have scrapes or bruises that we hadn't uncovered yet? Would I need to administer first aid? I am basic first aid certified, although I've never had to use those skills in this type of setting. And as she and I debriefed after the trip, this experience led to a discussion between us about the importance of knowing first aid and whether basic first aid or wilderness first aid would be more useful. If you frequently hike with a group, it's a good idea for at least one person in the group to have some kind of first aid certification. If you plan to backpack or hike in remote areas, wilderness first aid is something to look into. And that's something I'm doing now. I decided to take an online wilderness first aid class since I plan to continue backpacking.
So as Mary was evaluating the situation, so was I. So many things were going through my mind as I was lying there trying to collect myself and not groan so loudly that I scared Mary. So in addition to thinking about my Garmin sitting on my desk at home, I was thinking through these questions. Will it be safe for me to be moved, at least out of the rain? If it is safe for me to be moved, will I need further care? Am I going to be able to carry my pack? Am I going to need a splint or something to serve as a crutch? Is this going to be a trip-ending injury, or am I going to be able to shake it off and keep going? If we were able to move from this spot, where should we go? It was 3 miles back out to the trailhead. If we headed out that way, we could get in the cars and drive to help if needed. But would I be able to move fast enough to get there before sunset, or would we be risking additional problems by stumbling around in the dark? If it got dark before we reached the trailhead, would we be able to find a safe campsite? It wasn't flat ground we were hiking over. On the other hand, it was only 0.8 of a mile to our planned campsite, which would mean a guaranteed tent site, a shelter, but it would also put us further away from help. So we had to think through this carefully. On the other hand, if my hip was broken, or worse, what if my spine was injured and I couldn't be moved from the spot where I was lying? How would I get the help I needed then? We didn't have a way to call for help since I didn't have the Garmin and there was no cell service. There was little chance that somebody was going to pass by on the trail. We hadn't seen anyone all day, and it was getting later in the day and it was still raining really hard. If I couldn't move, Mary would have to go for help. So there would be other things to think through in that case. If I couldn't even be moved to the shelter of the arch to get out of the rain, Mary would have had to help me get as safe as possible. Remember, I was laying on a boulder in the rain. At least there was no danger of me falling further because we were already at the bottom of the gully, but there were other issues. So no matter what the injury is, it's important to put some insulation between the injured person and the ground, something like a sleeping pad, which I did have in my pack, so that would have worked. Second thing is, what's the weather doing? In our case, I would need some sort of shelter from the rain. Luckily, if we didn't need it, but I did have a group tarp in my pack, which would have worked well, but other things in my pack could have worked just as well. The rain fly from my tent, perhaps, or even the 55-gallon garbage bag that I keep in my 10 essentials bag. A third factor was the temperature was dropping, and I would get cold fast since I was wet and I wasn't moving around anymore. So in addition to having something to keep the rain off, I'd need some insulation over and around me. And I knew that in my pack, I had warm clothing layers, I had my sleeping clothes, I had a sleeping bag and a sleeping bag liner. You know, in a pinch, even my tent body could have been wrapped around me if we weren't able to pitch it since we were on the rocks there. Depending on the circumstances, when you encounter a situation that has to, you know, where you have to make somebody safe where they are, you might also have other factors, weather factors to consider, like snow or a lot of sun and high temperatures. So the answers to what you need to do will depend entirely on the situation that you find yourself in. But those are the kinds of questions you need to be prepared to think through, figure out the best choices.
So how do you decide what to do? Think about your specific situation. What time is it? How long do you have until dark? Is there a possibility of bad weather you wouldn't want to get stuck in alone? Is the injured person stable enough to be left by themselves, or is it better to stay with them?
So a couple of things to really think through is how long it can take for search and rescue to reach somebody if they have to get to you. And depending on the condition of the person and how long it may take for a rescue to arrive, you've got to think through whether you need to leave right away to get the person help at ASAP, or do you need to wait until it's safer for you to travel, like maybe when the snowstorm ends or in the morning when the sun comes back up. It's really important to understand that assembling and deploying a search and rescue team really takes some time. So in our case, I was thinking through this as I was laying there. It would take Mary probably close to 2 hours to get back to the cars, assuming she didn't have any problems following the trail and sounded all right. And as we discovered later, there was no cell service at the parking lot, so she would have had to drive someplace, find a signal, call 911. Since there's a lot of rock climbing in this particular area where we were, it's possible that somebody has search and rescue on speed dial, so maybe there's a team that could be assembled quickly. But even if it's quick, it's probably going to take an hour or 2 hours at best for a search and rescue team to be assembled, get their gear, and meet at the trailhead. And then there'll be another 2 hours for them to hike back to the Shangri-La Arch. So at the very best, you know, we're thinking it's like 6 hours for someone to arrive. By then it for sure would have been dark, but it could have been much longer than that. It could have been double that time or even the next morning before help could arrive. So if Mary did have to leave, before she would leave, she would help me get protected from the environment as much as possible, as we just discussed, but she'd need to leave some other things with me too that I'd need to have handy since I was there, would have been there by myself, waiting for help. And those things would be water, food, access to first aid supplies, shelter, which we already discussed, and then also some way to signal for help so that if I heard people or if search and rescue was trying to find me and I could hear them, I would have a way of signaling on my own. So my whistle would have served for that purpose. And it's important to note that 3 of anything means I need help. So 3 blasts of a whistle blown every few minutes would be an indicator to somebody that who heard it, that there was someone in distress that needed help. But it could be 3 blasts of a whistle, 3 shouts, 3 bangs on a pot. So if you hear 3 of anything when you're out backpacking, be aware somebody's hollering for help. You know, another important piece to this to think about is that it's okay to think in small steps, little goals. So even if I had been seriously injured, I wouldn't necessarily have had to worry about how I was going to get all the way out to the cars. I just needed to figure out how I could get to a place where I was safe. Maybe that would have been as simple as just moving underneath the arch where I would have been out of the rain. In our case, we knew we had a campsite that was only 0.8 of a mile away. So getting to that campsite is in the end what Mary and I agreed to do. It was going to be a safe place to spend the night. And if in the morning I was able to go further, it would be a better place. If I was unable, rather, to go further, I had to wait somewhere, it would be a good place to sit and wait while Mary went for help. And then she would have had a full 8 hours of daylight to go find help. So that's what we did. And we did reach the campsite without any further incident, although it took a good hour or more for us to cover that 0.8 of a mile. I was moving really, really slow. And we had just about enough daylight left to get camp set up, hang our food, and eat dinner before it started to get dark. And after a couple of doses of an anti-inflammatory and a night of rest, I was able to hike the 4 miles out to the car without assistance the next day. And you can see in the center photo, we were both smiling, and I'm pretty sure that that was taken on the hike out because it's not raining in that picture. So things were okay. In the left photo, a photo on the left, you can see Mary standing under the Shangri-La arch. She was smiling too, even though you can't see her that well. I was going to take some more pictures, but that happened right before I fell. And after I fell, my camera was destroyed because I was using my phone. I will tell you that it has been over 4 months since this happened, and I still am not 100% back to normal. The bruise is still there, although it's faded. And it turned out I had some pretty significant soft tissue injuries in my hips and my back and ribs and other places. But I was super lucky. It could have been so much worse. And I will never again make the mistake of skipping over some of those basic safety things like bringing my Garmin and making sure that that I and whoever I'm traveling with know where and how help can be accessed. This trip proved to me beyond a doubt that anytime you're in the backcountry, even when you're doing everything right and when you're in an environment that you're familiar with, you have to remember that it's an environment that you can't control and things can still go seriously wrong. So, I'm sorry, Mary, back to you.
Yeah, so before we move on to the reason that you really joined us, the Jeopardy game, we'll take a couple minutes here to see if you have any questions. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat box now.
We have a question from Lynn, who was asking if your phone was still functional and could you have summoned help with it?
Good question. So it was bizarre. My phone was still receiving messages, which I don't even know how, because after we get to the campsite, I started hearing texting, but the screen was crushed. It was just showing jagged pieces of light. I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't send, I couldn't even turn it off, but I could tell that I was getting messages somehow. So no, I was not able to use the phone to call out at all.
And we didn't have service.
Yeah, where we were at the arch. Yeah. Where we were at the arch, there wasn't a service. It wasn't until we got to the campsite that all of a sudden I started getting pings.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions in the chat box?
I don't see any other ones.
Okay. If you think of other things as we go along or while we're playing the game, feel free to type them in. And at the very end of things, after we've done the game and awarded prizes, we'll again have a chance for some questions, and at that time we'll set it up so people can unmute themselves. So Mary, are you ready to go ahead?
Okay, so now to the fun part, Wilderness Jeopardy. So one of the handouts that you have goes over the rules, but I'm going to read them now so that we're all on the same page. So bear with me, I hope I don't make this more confusing, but you will need a paper and pen to write your answers down. And once a clue is chosen and read, you'll type the word buzz in the chat box to respond. So I will announce the name of the person who typed buzz first, and they will get the first attempt to answer. Everyone else will get 10 seconds at that point to write down their answers, and then I will unmute the first buzzer so they can tell us their answer. You must have your answer in the form of a question, just like on Jeopardy. So if it's not phrased as a question, you won't get the points. If the first buzzer answers incorrectly, everyone who has written down the answer gets points. And the first buzzer still gets to pick the next category. After they select the next category, they will be muted, and the first person to type buzz in the chat box will get to answer first, and then it will proceed as above, like I just explained. Also, there are 3 double Jeopardy squares on the board. For double Jeopardy, only the first buzzer gets to double their points. And for final Jeopardy, everyone will write down your score and the amount you are wagering. When the clue is revealed, you'll have until the timer runs out, which is 40 seconds, to write your response. And everyone who gets it right will get points. And then a few other things, extra points might be given for clever or funny answers, even if they're wrong, at the moderator's discretion. And extra points will be earned if you list more than the required number of items on answers that have lists. So 5 extra points for each additional item. And you will keep your own score. So this is based on the honor system, but please make sure that you do write down your answers as described in case there's a point where we ask you to hold your answers up to the camera to show the group. And then the top 5 scorers will win these bright orange Miami Group neck gaiters that Nancy is modeling. And then there it is. And then I want to say one more thing. To let you know before we start, there are going to be some questions that might have more than one right answer, but in those cases, we're only going to count the answer that matches our answer. So even if your answer is technically correct, if it doesn't match what's on the slide, it won't count. Sorry.
Hey, so 5 of you will each win one of these fabulous custom designed Miami Group neck gaiters. Special thought was given to designing this attractive and practical accessory. Notice the brilliant hunter orange fabric, perfect for hiking through the backcountry during hunting season when you don't want to be mistaken for a deer. This neck gaiter can be worn more than a dozen ways, including as a beanie, a do-rag, a headband, or a neck warmer. It can be worn pirate style, pollard style, or in a pinch as a face mask. If you are one of our 5 lucky winners, you'll receive this lovely addition to your backpacking wardrobe, along with a set of instructions on the many ways to wear it by mail within 10 days. Happy hiking!
Okay, so I will be your host, and I'm going to choose the first category to get us started. So we're going to do prepare for 100.
Oh,
Oh,
that's a problem.
please hold.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen and figure out what happened there.
But while we wait, is everyone aware of the rules? Did it make sense? Is there anything that's confusing that we can clarify right now? Are we good to go?
I don't see anyone asking any questions, so.
Looks like Mary is waving her hand. If you
Okay.
want to unmute her to.
Okay, I think I can do that.
Mary Coleman.
The other Mary, let's see. This Mary, we'll try to unmute you. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I can't seem to find that box or buzz box that you were talking about. Where is that?
Okay, so at the bottom of your screen, if you kind of mouse over the screen, you should have an option that pops up at the bottom that says chat. You see that?
I'm on tablet, yeah, so I'm.
Oh, okay.
Can I solve the question because it's kind of small? Is there any way to-
I'm not sure about that. Does anyone else know?
I'm not able to do this.
Okay, if you're on a tablet, is there a way to access the chat bot, the chat function, or are we able to another way to do that so that other people can participate? Okay,
Brian might know.
Yeah, I'm on the tablet, and if I hit the 3 dots that say more, and you have a lot more settings that pop up, one of them being chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that either.
And Nancy is fixing the question screen.
Yep, I think I'm almost there. Something happened and we lost all of the animations for that that copy of it, which is most disturbing. I don't know what happened, but I just about have us back in business. So bear with me here. We're going to try that again. Okay, I've got my fingers crossed and I'm holding my breath that it works this time. Mary, let's skip prepare for 100 and pick a different one, and we're going to consider that one dead. Okay?
Okay, let's do assess for 100.
All right. Oh, please let this work. Yes. Okay.
Okay, so the first 2 things to do when an emergency happens. Oh, Terry. Okay, Terry is the first person to type buzz here. Everyone else can take 10 seconds to write down your answer, and I am going to unmute Terry. Okay, 10 seconds is up. Terry, do you want to give us your answer?
You survey the scene and survey the injured person.
Oh my goodness. So yes, you got the answer correct, except you forgot to put it in the form of a question.
Sorry.
That's 100 points.
Oh.
That means everyone who got the question correctly can give themselves 100 points. And I'm going to go back to the main screen for you, Mary.
Okay, but Terry still gets to choose the next category. So go ahead and let us know what you want to do next.
Let's do prepare for 200.
Okay, now I'm going to mute Terry and read the. Okay, a certification at least one person in your group should have, unless you bring a Girl Scout. So the next person to type buzz. Oh, okay, that goes quickly. Let me see here. Leah. Okay, Leah is the next person. Buzz, and everyone take 10 seconds to write down your answer, and I will unmute Leah. Okay, 10 seconds is up. Pencils down. Leah, what do you think the answer is?
What is a first aid certification?
I think that's close enough. What is first aid? Yes, very good, Leah.
And I'm a Girl Scout. But
And you're a Girl Scout also.
So she
You're
knows.
doubly covered.
Job. Okay, Leah gets to choose the next category.
That means this time only Leah gets the point because she was correct. Did I miss the?
Leah muted. Oops.
sorry, I muted myself. Let's just do let's do prepare for 300.
Okay. A course worth investing in if you plan to spend time in the backcountry. Hey, Terry again. Let me go to Terry. Everyone take your 10 seconds to write down your answer. Okay, the 10 seconds is up. Here. Oh, we have a double Jeopardy. Right? She gets double points.
What is wilderness first aid?
Ding, 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 ding. Perfect. And you phrase it in the form of a question. So
Yay.
Terry gets 600 points for that. Well done.
Okay, and Terry, you can choose the next category.
Let's do prepare for 400.
6 things related to safety which you should do when prepping for your backcountry trip.
You might have to give people longer than 10 seconds for this one.
Okay. We'll do 20 seconds. So type buzz in the chat box whenever you have your answer.
One will be a little more challenging.
This is one of those list questions.
20 seconds is a long time when it's just quiet. Do we have any buzzers in the chat
No,
box
we
yet?
don't have any. Right.
Oh,
So that's why
okay.
we're just waiting. This is a hard one. We didn't talk about what to do if we have no buzzers.
Well, if there's
Throw that one out.
Okay, we do have one.
Do we? I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. I misheard you. Okay,
No.
so we'll just go ahead and give the answer. And this
Well,
one,
we have someone who has 5. Should we give them a shot for a partial? Or do we want to just list the answers and move on?
Oh, give her a shot. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
be nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's Lynn. I'm going to unmute you, Lynn. I think everyone had time to write down answers if they. Okay, Lynn, what are your 5?
I saw someone buzz in that they have 6. My 5 are what are these items? Tell someone your plan, take the correct gear, dress correctly, take your personal locator, beacon, and stay found.
Those are all really good answers, but they're not quite what we had on our list.
Okay.
Pack an emergency contact health listing for yourself. Check the weather forecast. Pack a first aid kit. Find out where the nearest hospital or clinic will be. Take a first aid course or brush up on your skills. Check with the ranger or land manager for current trail conditions. Find out where you can access telephone service and know where to call an emergency, and cover your plans with your hiking partner. But your answers were still very good. I'm sorry that we can't give you the points for them.
No problem.
Did the person who listed 6 we have a winner there, or
That was Dina, and she said no.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that means this is good. This means everybody just learned something, so that's good. So we still need to let.
We did have Mary said, "What is PLB? Closest place to get help? Emergency plan with going buddy, field service, location of first aid kit." I don't know if those were.
Those sounded like all things that were on there. I didn't.
Maybe cell service.
them
Yeah.
up.
I think.
Yeah. So
So
say them
she-
again. That might count.
Okay. Give
What
it.
What is PLB? She put it in the chat. What is
Okay.
PLB? Closest place to get help.
Yeah.
Emergency plan with going buddy.
Yeah.
Field service. Not quite sure what that.
Oh, I missed
I
that
think maybe
one.
that's cell service. Maybe that was supposed to be.
Oh, cell service. Well,
Self-service. Ah, yes.
Helping
Okay.
you out.
location of first aid kit.
Well, there's 4 of them on there that match our list. Is that the best one that we have? Maybe we should give her the point.
And then Dina said that she was close. Do you know how many you had out of the 6?
Barry, who was it? Whose list did you read? I missed the name.
Hang on.
It was me.
That was Mary Cullum.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
I thought we were supposed to put our answers in the chat or not.
I
So,
did,
you're supposed to type buzz in the chat, and then we'll unmute you and you can say your answer. If you're not the first person to type buzz, you just write it down. But it's a little confusing. So you did good.
Okay.
Okay. So then can Mary choose the next category?
absolutely.
Okay.
Are
All
we
right,
straight?
Mary.
Is everybody straight on who got points there? Did we give points to somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say? I didn't hear.
Care for 100.
Care for 100. The kind of care you should give an injured person. The next person to type us first gets to take this one. I'm going to mute Mary for now. Okay, so you can buzz in when you think you know the answer. Oh, Jerry. So everyone else take 10 seconds to write down your answer. And I'm going to unmute Jerry. Ten seconds is up. Having a little trouble unmuting here.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay. Well, what is checking for the for any injuries, blood, open wounds?
So good answers, Jerry, but what we were looking for is what is the type of aid you're trained to give? So if a person is injured and needs first aid, you should give them the type of care that you've been trained to give. And there's a reason for stating it that way, is that if you are not first aid CPR certified, or you haven't been trained in a particular way of providing care, and you give that sort of care and it goes wrong, there are liability issues related to that. So if somebody needs first aid, you should provide them with the type of first aid that you've been trained to give. Don't try to make up like trailside surgery on your own, in other words. But your answer was good. You just don't get the point.
Got that right, can give themselves 100 points. And then I think we're going to stop now and go to Final Jeopardy.
All right.
10 minutes left in the night.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment so that I can take us to the appropriate screen for that. So this got a little clunkier because of a few technical issues, but I hope you all are going to be forgiving. Just kind of give us some grace for that. All right, here we go. Final Jeopardy. Okay, we'll stop and let Mary give some directions here. Oh no, Nancy's giving directions here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the category is. The category is health. So what you are to do now is, on your pad of paper, write down your current score and write down how much that you are wagering, and get ready to write your response. I'm going to first give everyone 10 more seconds to write down, no, 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. You should have written down your total score that you have right now and the amount that you're wagering. And here comes the category or the clue. The period of time following a traumatic injury during which there is the highest likelihood that prompt medical treatment will prevent death. Okay, and you have about 40 seconds to write down your answer. When the music stops, the time is up. Time is up. Okay, so set your pencils down. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can actually see people's faces. So you're going to get to turn your cameras on and hold up your score or hold up your answer. And actually, I have to go back here and share my screen for a minute so that you all can see. Oh, so many glitches tonight. That's a little frustrating. Okay, so as you can see here, the answer is, what is the golden hour? Hang on, let's get through the music again. Okay, we're just going to stop it right there. The answer is, what is the golden hour? That's what it's referred to in search and rescue and wilderness first aid courses. So, okay, again, stopping the share so we can see people's answers. If you got the correct answer, hold it up so that Mary and I can see. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3 people got the correct answer. I see Leah, Mary, and Terry. Is there anyone else? Okay. And now, Leah, everyone, actually go ahead and add up your score. So if you got the correct answer, add the amount that you wagered to your score. If you did not get the correct answer, yes, Mary. Hang on, Mary.
Have to unmute her.
How many points I got? I didn't pick it out. I didn't catch it. What I got for that one. Did I get anything for it? I don't know.
For which one?
Well, Barry was kind of
oh yeah, I think we decided you got the 400 points for that. So yes, you get the 400 points.
I got 400.
Yes, you did.
Then that's what I would wager, but I didn't know where.
Okay.
400. Okay.
All right.
Then I think we have a fourth too, Terry here.
Okay, Terry, Mary, Leah, and Dina. Thank you, Jerry. I see you're fine. All right. Okay, so everyone who thinks they might have won, hold your score sheet up with your total amount so we can figure out who our top 5 winners are. It's kind of hard to see the numbers. I hope you can see them better than I can, Mary.
What do we get for getting the final Jeopardy?
Whatever you wagered. If you got the last one right, however much you wagered, you add to your score. If you did not get the last one right, you subtract whatever you wagered from your final score. So I see Leah has 500 points. I see Dina has 300 points. I see Terry has 800, and so does Mary. So awesome. Okay. Anybody else who's not showing their screen, let me give you all the ability to unmute yourself so that you can tell us if you have, somebody already turned that off. So if you have more than, somebody has, Brian Wolf says he has 10,000 points. So much for the honor system. Okay, I'm going to remember that one, Brian. Okay, so I'm going to, I think we have 4 winners. I'm going to put my email address in the chat box real quick. It is summittrektravel@yahoo.com. This is Nancy Ball. Those of you who won, each of you will get one of those lovely orange buffs that we talked about before, that I showed you before. But you're going to need to email me with your name and your mailing address so that I can put them in the mail to you. So make sure you get my email address from that. And we're going to have just a couple of things that a couple of slides we want to run through real quickly to wrap up before you all leave. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to finish up. There we go. Okay. We do have one more poll, Denise, if you would launch that. Just so for those of you who are still with us, it'll kind of give us an idea of how well we did. We certainly had our share of technical glitches with this one. It went a lot more smoothly when we were practicing it without real participants. But hopefully you still learned some things that will make you, give you a little more confidence when you're out in the backcountry. And I hope that you never, ever have to use them. But as we said at the very start, odds are if you spend enough time in the backcountry, you eventually will have things go wrong. So while you're looking at that, again, we will offer a live Q&A in just a few minutes, and you'll be able to just ask any questions that you have out loud. We've had a lot of fun doing these virtual outings, so we've decided to continue them through 2021. And that means even after we're able to meet in person again, we're still going to do some virtual outings at least once or twice a month. So if there are any particular topics you'd like to see, please let us know. You can put that in the chat box if you would. If you love the outdoors as much as we do, we'd love to have you join us exploring, enjoying, and protecting the planet. And there are multiple ways of doing that. You can become a Sierra Club member. If you want to support the work the Sierra Club is doing, you can make a donation. You can join our meetup, and that way you'll never miss any of our future outings. And you could also become a volunteer. In addition to that, speaking of being a volunteer, actually, you could become an outings leader. So if you're already an experienced outdoor person and you have skills to share and you're passionate about sharing it with other people, we'd love to have you join us. We are always looking for outing leaders who have a passion for sharing their experience with others. And even though we're doing it virtually right now, someday we will be back on the trails and waterways in person again. And we have an awful lot of fun doing that. So we'd love it if you consider joining us. So this was brought to you, happily presented by Roads, Rivers, and Trails, our independently owned and outdoor outfitter in Milford, Ohio, by Summit Trek and Travel, your connection for outdoor adventure travel, and by the Miami Group Sierra Club, a part of the largest grassroots environmental organization in the country. So also want to let you know, if you're hopping up here now, we're going to be back again in 2 weeks with a new topic. On March 4th, Barry Randall will be presenting Up a Creek with a Paddle, which is an introduction to canoe and kayak camping. Okay, so once again, going to stop sharing my screen, and you all have the ability to unmute yourself if you have questions for us. Just don't ask us how to do a Jeopardy virtually on PowerPoint, because we obviously still have some things to learn about making that work when there's a bunch of people on here. I think part of what happened was, it doesn't matter. Anyway, hopefully you still were able to get some benefit from the ideas that we shared and from sharing the experience that Mary and I had when we were out at Carter Caves. So any questions? Barb, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was just late getting in, so I apologize for that. I was.
Oh, no worries. No apology needed.
But I thought it was very well conducted, and I really enjoyed watching the last little bit of the presentation.
Thanks, Barb. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, Mary, you can unmute yourself. Here, let me try to help you.
So, did both of you have your cell phone?
We both had our cell phones, but we had no cell service.
But I thought 911 was like it all.
No, not unless you have a satellite phone. You still have to have a way to connect. We had no way for our phones to connect. Once we got to our campsite, we did have a signal, but while we were hiking and also at the trailhead, there was no cell service. So no.
So from the time you got on the trail, to the time you got to your campsite, what was that total one-way distance?
From when we started the trail was 4 miles.
And you got injured like right off the bat.
I got injured at 3 miles, a little over 3 miles out, and had a little less than a mile left to get to that campsite.
I okay, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So did you rest for a while?
Yeah, so for honestly, for a little while, I couldn't even get up because it was very painful. So yeah, we just hung out there underneath the arch for a while I was just trying to assess and figure out if I was going to be able to walk or not. and if so, you know, how far I'd be able to get. So we just kind of hung out there for a little while. I don't know, I don't know. Time was kind of a blur, maybe a half an hour, maybe a little more than that before we decided for sure that, you know, I thought I could make it and we went ahead and moved on.
So when you did get up, and you decided, okay, I think I can make it, you said you had to out like an 8/10 of a mile to go?
About 8/10 of a mile, yeah. It was either that or 3 miles back out to the car.
So once you got up and decided that you could stand, how did you feel about walking that last 8/10 of a mile?
Yeah. Well, I missed the last part you said.
So the 8/10 of a mile.
Correct. Yeah.
So how considering it was a hip injury?
So my biggest worry was that I had broken something and that I wouldn't be able to walk. When I got up and moved around, at first I still wasn't sure because everything hurt a lot. But as I moved around, there were no like, when something is broken, you have a particular pain spot right there. And it didn't hurt any more when I was moving than when I was standing still. And it just didn't feel like anything was broken. And so I didn't think I would do any further damage by walking. And I thought, you know, worst case was I wouldn't make it the whole 8/10 of a mile, and we would have tried, and Barry would have to go back, you know, at 3.5 miles instead of 3 miles, or we would have had to pitch our tents on the side of the trail or something and wait for morning. But there didn't seem to be a downside at that point to at least trying to walk on, because I didn't think I was going to do any further damage.
So when you did finally get back and get to the doctor, what was the extent of your injury?
Well, there was a list. Nothing was broken. They x-rayed a couple of times and did a CT scan. Nothing was broken, but there was, and over the next few days, there was increasing swelling from all of the soft tissue damage internally. So I damaged both SI joints in my pelvis. I damaged a couple of the discs in my small back. I damaged a rib. I had that nasty bruise on my leg. I thought I broke one of my fingers, but it wasn't broken. It was just also really hurting. So there was like a whole list of things. It was a bunch of stuff. The impact was really hard, and it's just everything in my lower back and pelvis got just banged really hard. And my eye, it just took about 2 weeks before I realized I also had the vitreous in my eye pulled loose in one eye. And so I had these like chunks of things, like seeing floaters, except it was more like seeing, you know, little Godzillas walking around or something. But that didn't show up for a couple of weeks after the fall. So it was, but it could have been so much worse. It could have been really bad. It could have been really bad. So I was lucky.
Hey, Nancy, Lynn was asking if you could talk a little bit about your choice of PLB. I mean, do you have a preference? I know you have the InReach Mini, I believe.
Yeah, so that's the only one I've ever used is the InReach Mini. I belong to several Facebook groups with lots of backpackers, and so I asked for a bunch of people's opinions, and I kind of weighed those out and checked the reviews. But the reason I settled on the Unreached Mini is, first of all, it's small and light, so it's good for backpacking in that way. But it also has the ability to, like, I can pre-program text when I'm out, so that periodically when because it works off a satellite, even when I don't have a cell phone signal, it'll still work. And so there were pre-programmed texts that said things like, everything's fine, I'm on schedule, or I'm behind schedule, but there's no worries, or meet me at such and such, meet me at the trailhead, or just different things that I could just push a button and send it to whoever I wanted it to go to. So I could send it to my husband, I could send it to people I'm going to be meeting up with, which was a nice feature. Plus, it does have the SOS button that if I'm in trouble and I need help, all I have to do is flip that open and press it, and it'll